The general resurrection. This podcast is on the resurrection of the dead, not referring to the resurrection of Jesus Christ, but to that of all human beings, the righteous and the unrighteous. This is also called the general resurrection. This builds on the previous podcast, where we learned that the dead are in a waiting place. No one is in heaven or hell yet. One reason is we don't go to our ultimate destination without a body. Let me just clarify a few matters before we jump in to this much neglected topic. When Jesus Christ came back to life, his resurrection was unique. Technically speaking, no one had ever been resurrected before him. I hesitate to use the word resuscitated because that makes us think that someone wasn't just dead. He just needed to be given CPR, or she needed to smell the smelling salts. But there are people raised from the dead in the Old Testament and in the New Testament. Quite a few, in fact. And yet Jesus' resurrection is not like that of Lazarus or Tabitha, because his body is now of a completely different nature. They didn't come back to life with supernatural powers. And in time, they died again. Well, we'll come to an explanation of how his body was different later on in this lesson. And that'll give us a clue as to how our bodies will be transformed at the end of time. So, the unique resurrection of Jesus from the dead, the specific resurrection, is not the same as the general resurrection, at which time all human beings will rise to meet God. The doctrine of the resurrection of the dead is downplayed in Protestant religion especially. Very often the physical is set in opposition to the spiritual. What counts is our soul, not our body. What counts are spiritual needs, not physical needs. So people say. I'm not so sure we can make such a distinction scripturally. Whether this has to do with our ministry to the whole person, or whether it has to do with our own bodies. The body is not something to be denigrated. The body is good. And one day our body will be transformed. Yes, the Bible says we'll get a new body. And yet, a recent survey indicates that 2 out of 3 Americans do not believe they will have a body in heaven. I used to think this way. I remember very well. It was the end of 1980. I was at divinity school.